Good morning. I'm Dan. John's going to be joining me, and we're going to walk you through the magical world of hazardous waste. So as we're walking through this, we're going to give you a little history on our program. We're going to talk about what it is, why do we collect it, why is it a concern. John's going to tell you about a survey he did looking at other programs. We're going to tell you some success stories, some issues we're having with our collections and our facility, and we'll open it to some questions in the end. So with our program history, the program really got started from public inquiring what to do with these toxics, what to do with these chemicals. And this was in '89, public outcry kind of pushed the envelope on we need to do something with this. And that's when our first collection event started in '89, and they were very difficult to put together. They were very busy, sometimes an hour wait in line before you could drop off your chemicals or your unwanted. There was no reuse, no swap of goods. We've come full circle now, and we're back to where the one-day collection events are out of control. We're seeing 45-minute waits. The main problem with that is convenience. No one wants to drive out to either the Transjordan or the Salt Lake Valley landfill, and they consider that too far. So the one-day collection events have come full circle. We're having immense problems with crowd control, safety. We're having to haul all this waste back and forth. That's another safety issue. So John's going to handle the part where he's going to talk about his study to relocate, or the efficacy to relocate the collection facility, the permanent collection facility. Give you a brief overhaul. We have different waste streams that we kind of dumb everything down, you know, the acids, the bases, TOX, flammables, batteries, paint. There's sublayers to all of these, as you can see. If you're not familiar with what is hazardous waste, it's in your flammables. You could have gasoline, kerosene, lantern oil, lamp oil, anything that's flammable, boiled linseed oil. Of course, acids and bases, we need to keep those separate. You've got your aerosols. We get a lot of aerosols. Most of this we try to put out for reuse. Of course, for safety reasons, we don't put out the aerosols. Some of the other acids and bases or meth lab materials we do not put out for reuse for obvious reasons. And just to give you an idea, this is, again, dumbed down, categories on the bottom, pounds of waste over here on the left, and this is what we took in 2011. As you can see, e-scrap is our largest waste stream. It is the fastest growing waste stream in the nation. Paint being our second. And one reason we saw a rise in paint this year compared to last year is we have in the past sent all our latex paint through the Beehive Foundation. We have that transported down to Mexico, and they reuse the latex paint for graffiti cover-up. I don't need to tell you guys what's going on the border of Mexico. No sane driver will go that direction, so we were stuck with a lot more latex paint than we've had in the past. So that's why the number rose this year. So what is hazardous waste? These are photos taken from our facility. Again, a lot of paint, a lot of aerosols of various types. Fluorescent light tubes, we collect those, we send them off, and the mercury is recaptured from those. The 1 pound cylinders we heard the National Park gentleman talk about, and the larger cylinders we use a natural gas company. They will retrofit these, or they'll crush them and use them for recyclable materials as well. We get a lot of oddities. You never know what you're going to get out there. We still see a lot of mining materials, being Utah, having a rich history of mining. There's still a lot of mining materials we see. The calcium carbide, of course, is one of the ones that scares us a little bit. It is very expensive for us to get rid of. Most of our contractors don't like dealing with the calcium carbide. We get, from schools, we get things like frogs and animals and whatnot that are sitting in jars of formalin or formaldehyde. Still a lot of DDT, mange, hair treatment, scalp treatment. We get a lot of weird things like that. It's always fun to read labels. And then mercury, tons of stuff with mercury, from your thermostat switches, mercury thermometers, lab mercury, liquid mercury. And John is going to talk about some current issues at the facility.
Thanks, Dan. All right, Dan mentioned before the concerns that I'm going to go through are part of a study I did for a master's internship, and the survey that we collected the results from was conducted over what we call our collection event season last year. So from the beginning of June through the end of August. It's a total of 9 events, or 12 events actually, since we added Draper. So there aren't hundreds or thousands of results here. As I'll go through it in a minute. So what we found, though, at least going through the history of the program, looking at the size of the facilities that we have and their use and their increasing usage over time, the one we have at present is very undersized for what we handle now and what we're going to need to handle. So a 55-gallon drum, if you're not familiar, is about 2 feet in diameter and about 3.5 feet high. And the Salt Lake facility is the larger of the two. Transjordan has a small one. They're capable of putting 25 drums in there, whether they have material or not. The idea is that material comes in, it's sorted, put in a drum, and transported out unless it's recoverable, like used oil and antifreeze are. So needless to say, the facility gets packed quickly, especially in the summer after a large collection event. They're capable of processing between 20 and 55 drums per week. And the staff and equipment do this, as it says there, the facility's open 311 days a year. So we're taking out Sundays, and Thanksgiving and Christmas are the only holidays that they lose, or that they're not there at the facility. They work 4 10-hour shifts. At the Salt Lake facility, there are 4 employees. They overlap those, so during a busy season, there's at least 3 of them there at any given time. During the winter, it's usually 2. And because of the hours they work, they have to deal with a lot of inclement weather, and they're exposed to it because of the design of the facility. So extreme heat and extreme cold. Extreme heat affects the employees more. Cold gets in and damages the machine and requires repair. So we have lost time there because they can't crush the paint cans. They can't operate the scales. The forklift's not operating, so they can't pick up the drums to transport them. This is the photo of our Salt Lake Valley facility at the landfill. And you can see it's just open-sided steel beam and a corrugated roof. That's it. It does have a dent in it from a past experience when one of the drums exploded. So there's always a potential for something to go wrong, even though it's out away from the public. So the operating costs that we're concerned with, obviously it's volume now. It's tracked in our systems by pounds per customer, and it's averaged based on the number of business customers who are charged, and then total volume we receive at the end. We find a way to average that out. So right now, to pay for it, it's funded through tonnage fee at the landfill. You heard Eric mention that here in the West we have lower tonnage fees than most other places. Well, our 75 cents, it was what we collected per ton, and now it's $1.50 that goes to our household hazardous waste collection. And it's a very small percentage of it, and it's sufficient for now to cover our needs. It pays for, you can see on the left side, the 3 categories that we separate funding into. I guess labor, we have both the full-time, the 4 people that are staffing it at the Salt Lake facility, and I think there are 2 at Transjordan, and then the volunteers during the summer who have to be health department employees. They're not just people that walk up and say they want to play today. That can be 20 to 30 people. Then the supplies is where we have our education funding from. Put advertisements in the paper. We'll work with the libraries. They're county facilities, but we still have to ask for permission to put up banner ads. Some of them have a new digital display. They'll run it across. Then the equipment, and this is where the equipment repair comes in as well. So not only capital equipment purchases, but because of the damage over time, it's shortened the length of time when they have to actually look at replacing equipment, where once it was 10 years, it can be as short as 6 now. Then the training, and definitely fuel. As Dan mentioned, there's a lot of transport involved, since we're collection events during the summer go from Draper to Sugar House Park is the furthest north. They're all on the east side, with the exception of Draper if you use I-15 as a boundary. And the transport involves going up and using main roads, highways where they can, but it's still quite a bit of travel and a high fuel cost for them. And then the disposal, even though they have a contract with a hauler to take what they can't recover, recycle, or reuse, the rate that the contractor charges can change whenever they decide to change it. So it did that last year twice that I know of. So where they were paying, let's say $1 a ton for transport, it went up almost double that. And then it came back down slightly toward the end of the year. But all these costs that are intrinsic to the program, we'd like to be able to get a better handle on, so that we can better serve the public, better use the funds that they're providing via the tonnage fees, and certainly provide a better service. And we also have another concern with our ABOPs. For those of you who don't know, that's places that the public, not businesses, are allowed to bring antifreeze, batteries, oil, and paint. The batteries are rechargeable. Alkaline, if you don't know, are useless once they're dead, so they just go in the waste stream. Well, it's unfortunate. There are programs in other states where they can now reclaim those. We haven't got one of those yet. It's something that still needs some investigation. But they're set up at public works facilities in Sandy and Murray. So they have some security. You have people there watching. You can monitor them via camera. Murray requires people to come up and sign in, so that they have a name, a license plate, a phone number, in case something goes wrong, so we can get in touch with them. Yeah, car batteries, lead acid batteries, rechargeables, so Lion, lithium ion, nickel metal hydride, and NIM batteries. And then there's one more that we take, but if it's safer, easiest to say non-alkaline battery. So if it comes out of a vehicle, or if it's in a cell phone or other portable device, even electric shaver, we'll take those. And then you can see up there that businesses still manage to sneak in. The last one, I went to Murray ABOP, a local RV facility. They have their own paint shop. So we came in and found that they'd filled one of our 55-gallon drums full of pint-sized paint cans from their shop for disposal. The businesses, like I think I mentioned before, they're the ones that are charged a fee for disposal. It's nominal. It's not a huge fee, and it's based on their waste stream, obviously. But when they sneak in and do this, it's an unfair advantage to them, where we're trying to provide a public service rather than a commercial one. And then the materials they bring in can often pose a hazard. So they'll typically bring in materials that are hazardous, but they're not accepted. They're neither antifreeze, batteries, oil, nor paint. And if they combine with something else in there, they can get off-gassing or erosion of a container, and then it spills, and then there's a cleanup problem. This is the Murray ABOP. It's after it's been emptied once, so, or recently I should say, because none of the containers are overflowing yet. It's the more popular of the two between Sandy and Murray. The survey that we conducted involved handing out flyers to folks and asking them if they'd be willing to participate. So we printed off 700 of those as a way to sort of keep track of how many we were actually talking to over the season. And we managed, out of those 700 handed out, to get 247 responses. They were handed out at the collection events. They were put at our front desk in the environmental health building, in Murray. And some of them were handed out at the HHW facility and the landfill. So trying to reach a larger demographic than just our events customers, but the majority of the respondents were the event customers. The purpose are the 3 questions up there. It was an 11 question survey, and a 12th one was a box for suggestions and comments. The 3 things we wanted to answer though was, where is the majority of HHW coming from in the county? Household hazardous waste. We wanted to know this. It would tell us basically where we're reaching and who's responding to the advertising, education, and what we're able to get out. What the proportion of the households to businesses is. So that one's a little more difficult to get since we don't regularly track the number of households coming in the way we do businesses. Since businesses are charged, they have the receipts, they can, well, most of them, some of them do skip out. But when we have a collection event, especially like the last 2 we had at Sugar House last year, I can't remember, it was somewhere around 50 to 60,000 pounds of electronic waste from one event. And that's on top of somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 55-gallon drums full of other materials from just one 3-hour, which should have been 3-hour collection event. And there's no way when we're that busy to count every person that comes through there. So the accuracy right now for the surveys, it's not perfect, but it's something we plan to work on, because we want to get a better idea of how and who to educate. The types of HHW we want to know more about, especially where they're ones people are more willing to throw away because it's easier. So yeah, your trash can's right outside in your garage, in your driveway, outside the back door. I don't want to take this or save it for a week to take it to an event, so I'm going to throw it away. I can't recycle it. It's important to know that because 1, it tells us what's still going to the landfill, and 2, it tells us what we need to further educate people about. So the first question, as in where the majority is coming from, 60% of the folks that responded to the survey are all from the northeast corner, so Salt Lake City, Holiday, and Mill Creek. They're all the ones that use Sugar House and the Holiday right next door to the Holiday City offices, the collection events during the summer. It's not to say they don't go out to the landfill, but the odds are these are all folks that use our collection events. They've been participating longer than other cities, so the folks there are more aware of the value of disposing properly of household hazardous waste, and the education, it doesn't take as much to get their attention. We can send them a date and a time, says we'll be here at this time, and they'll show up. Where in Sandy and Draper, we're lucky to get 5 to 10% of the same number of people to show up. I think all of last year, the busiest Draper got was maybe 36 customers. And that had time to count them because they were coming one every 5 or 10 minutes. And the household to business ratio, 96%, you can see up there, responded as households and 3 as business. There was one respondent that said he was both, because he owned his own business. I think it was an auto shop, so he disposed of his household waste from his house in one way and his business waste out at the landfill. The businesses are charged a fee, and part of that does go to our program. Households aren't at this time, where we know in other programs that they are. Our volume is up since 2004, 100%. So we don't just have a linear curve on our hands that's going exponential on us. The business volume has fortunately remained fairly steady. It's not to say there aren't fewer businesses, but the number of businesses that participate consistently are the same ones. They're the ones that the Larry H. Miller Group, or somebody that's been around a long time, they know what to do with their waste, where it goes, so there aren't any arguments with it. If you remember Jesse's comments yesterday about his P2 program, where last year he had 100 new applications for auto businesses. These are all folks that would need to know where they're supposed to dispose of used oil, antifreeze, and solvents. Well, not all of those folks are obviously out there. They don't stay in business for the year. They don't get tracked because they're not consistently using the facility. Now, the material that goes out with the trash, we had a large majority that would be happy to use a year-round facility that's nearby, so closer to their home. Right now, it's both of the landfills. Those of you who don't know, Transjordan landfill in Salt Lake County is 118th south off of the U-111 that runs back by the Oakers. It's about 7,400 west. And then the county landfill's up in the north, and it's 60th west, California Avenue. So, because they're landfills, they've been shoved into places where they can be forgotten. So we don't want to mess with it. It smells. When in reality, the way they're controlled now, they don't. Anytime you want a comparison, you're welcome to drive along California Avenue. From 5600 west, if you drive in to the left, you see a bird sanctuary. That's what used to be the Salt Lake Valley landfill. On the right, you'll pass the new one, which forms a U shape around ET Technologies. They process contaminated soils. And then past that, you have 2 construction and demolition landfills. When you start smelling something, odds are you'll be within 100 yards of ET, not the landfill. I'm not trying to pick on them, but because of their operations, that's where the odors come from. The landfill does a very good job of controlling those. Transjordan's the same way. They do a very good job. So what the survey also tells us is that there's still a large number of people that are more than happy to put HHW in their garbage. And that tells us that we got a long way to go, not just to reach them, but to make sure that more of this material's staying out of the landfill. It tells us, our education and ads are effective in communicating the hazards, which is one thing. But I don't think that they're reaching all the parts of the valley they need to. So, for those of you who don't live in Salt Lake Valley, it's growing southwest. So West Jordan, South Jordan, Harriman, Riverton, Bluffdale, those are the areas that are growing. And they don't have a service other than the Transjordan landfill. So trying to get them to participate is a little bit difficult. Other programs that we researched for this, there are 3 of them. Portland, Oregon is one. One commonality they all have is that they're all funded by state grants. Not tipping fees as ours is. So the HHW program in Portland, they have a budget of $4 million a year on average, and their program costs them just under that, about 3.5. Their education is where their advertising promotion comes in. It's what they initially started out at $100,000, and talking with their program coordinator last year, he said that they spend almost nothing because the program's been around long enough, they don't have to advertise. Word of mouth is enough to keep it going. They have, based on their data, about a 10% participation rate, even though they consider themselves a successful program and they receive that state fund money, they're still only reaching a very small portion of the population. And what they try to work on as product stewardship, which means that, you know, I guess for our example would be Samsung. They pay for our electronic waste disposal. They're taking stewardship over products they produce, and pretty much every other electronic manufacturer. The Indiana's program, also funded by state monies. They got the volumes that they collected. I tried to find years where they're fairly, not equivalent data, but within 2 or 3 years of each other, because none of these programs publish their data regularly. We have, they spent about 166 per ton on education for 1 year. That's a lot of money. And I'll show you a comparison of what we spend. For those 3 years, 4 years, 2006 to 9, they showed an increase in the amount they collected. Not a drastic one, but a steady one. And then because of the economic collapse, the state funds were suspended for the collection program. So where ours isn't subject to that, their collection programs are no longer collecting, or were not at the time, and ours was still operating. That shows you an advantage, at least, to having the funding come from an outside source as opposed to government source. Tucson, Arizona, they have a very wide and varied number of materials that they collect at their events. They have what they call a drop and swap, where you can bring in serviceable items, toasters, microwaves, clothing, things like that, where you bring it in and somebody else can come get it for free. But they count that volume as part of their HHW tonnage. So they report they collected over 1 million pounds per year, 2008 to 2010, which is about what we do. So they're on about the same scale. And they're saying that they reached over 30,000 households. So 8% participation, which is about what Oregon gets with their huge budget and word of mouth. So there's not a lot that they spend on education in Tucson, because they find when they do, they can't handle the business. So they have thousands of customers willing to participate, and they don't have the means to collect the material because they couldn't keep up with it. Our program, we've managed to increase our disposal costs because of the volume, not because of, well, and in part because of the contractor rates. They do fluctuate. We've increased to over 1 million pounds collected. I think the last 2 years we've been over 1 million pounds. And then our supplies, which include education and the other items we mentioned before, are about 94,000. Out of that, we spend 6 to 9,000. Last year we spent 9, and that's at a maximum. And we're still reaching about 10% of the population, at least in Salt Lake Valley. As part of the program, we used a software program called Stella. It does systems dynamics modeling, so you can input data and predict trends. The model that I designed had 3 separate categories, as we wanted to find out how they interrelate. So we took the education, which shows how effective we are at taking someone who's new to the program or new to the area providing them education where they're learning, and then helping create a participant, someone who will continually use the program. There are those that drop out or move or leave, and they were accounted for as non-participants. The recycling program, we take the material that comes in as product, because at the time, yes, it's hazardous, but no, it's not a waste. So we show it going from product to households or businesses, and then it becomes a waste. And then the budget it's fairly simple. Because it's funded by the tonnage fees, it goes through a really short little cycle where it's funded either to education or to disposal costs. These are some of the results we got. The conversion rate is how effective we are at creating a participant from someone who's new to the program. So if we're only 10% effective, that red spike in the middle, it shows the number of folks that are learning, and you notice that the slower we are, the less effective we are, the longer it takes to get them to want to participate. So, improving our education, our models, increases the number of people we're able to reach, and increases the number of participants. So you see on the bottom, if we're half successful, so 1 out of every 2 people that are new to the program decide to stay with it, that in a very short period of time, we can improve our methods, improve our collection, and hopefully keep more of the stuff out of the landfills. Oh, got some conclusions here that Dan will go over with you.
So we got to wrap this up quick, but real briefly, what John's been telling you about why this is a concern. We don't want the contaminated soil. We don't, we want to increase the life capacity of landfills, so you can do that by keeping some of this pounds of waste out of there. Most of the stuff we're talking about has very crazy pHs that contributes to the leachate that could be the contaminate coming out of the landfill. So we don't want that getting in our aquifer. And then where it hits home, I think, is the average household holds about 100 pounds or more of this stuff in their home. So that's a safety issue for our children, our pets. If there's ever a fire or an earthquake, firemen are very concerned about entering homes that have stockpiles of this stuff. We all hoard it. Everybody does it. So one thing about the collections I wanted to mention, not specific on this slide, is our collection events, community collection events. It costs us roughly, we've got an approximate here of $1.60 a pound. At our facility, we've got it down to 51 cents a pound. Doesn't matter what the waste is, put it all together, it's about 51 cents a pound. For collection events, it's upwards of $2.50, $2.60 a pound. So big difference in all that safety of hauling and manpower. Lost days from our facility, that adds up. Being outdoors. Misuse of ABOPs, that's another big one. John spoke heavily about education. That's something we think we could do better with, especially if the population continues to grow. Possible relocation from the landfills, maybe somewhere on the I-15 corridor. That's what we're looking for now. Centralize the location, possibly have better coordination of getting communities to be involved. And that all takes money, so that's where the conversation is now. The take-home message from this really crazy busy slide is you can see the growth over the years. This is abnormal to most national HHW programs. Nationally, the trend is you see an increase to a certain extent and everything planes off. We are not seeing that in Utah. We continue to grow every year. Last year we collected 1.7 million pounds of waste. Some of the great partnerships, real briefly, Samsung has been great to work with. They have paid for all disposal of e-scrap for the last about 2.5 years. Great partnership. They pay advertising. They will fund our collection events for disposal only. We still have to come up with the manpower. Prescription meds have been great. We've got drop boxes at most police stations. That's fabulous. We've got 9 libraries, hoping to add 2 more soon for the fluorescent light bulb collections. We've got, we told you about the centrally located HHW facility we hope to have soon. Soon is a relative term in government. Lots of advertising. So this is some of the posters and flyers we give out to pharmacies. This is the drop boxes for the prescription meds. We need improved security at the ABOPs, and we hope to see that. We hope to get better coordination of collection events all along the Wasatch, all over Utah, all municipalities, all counties. We're not seeing the same effort that Samsung is contributing in other parts of Utah, and we would like to see more involvement from manufacturers, evening the playing field for taking this, this e-scrap back and getting rid of it responsibly. John's references, if you have any questions from his study, great list of references. He did a great job on his study for this. And then any questions? I know that's kind of quickly wrapping up, but we're getting the hook. Yes. Yes. So she was asking the question about for maybe smaller population groups, rural societies, suggestions how to get this going. That's a loaded question. As you've heard John and I talk about, one of the dilemmas we run into is the more you advertise, the more people come to these collection events, and if you don't have the people there, the logistics to handle that waste, you're just stuck with all this stuff, and it really is a safety concern, and we're seeing that again now. So it's a fine line of having the manpower to keep up with the advertising and the education, that concerted effort at both ends. If you advertise and you don't have the manpower, you're kind of stuck. If you have the manpower and no education, you're kind of stuck. Yeah. So funding, it sounds like, is a question. That's always an issue in smaller communities. Maybe we should talk after. I was at a national conference, and great presentation from the most rudimentary HHW collection I've ever seen. This guy and his wife traveled around Indiana, and they ran the entire program out of a horse trailer. No money. They supplied all fuel by themselves. They slept in tents on the site where they were going to collect it. I mean, these guys had it figured out without huge backing from major corporations. And I was in awe of the simplistic fashion that they were able to travel in a whole state and do such a good job that they were doing. Showed me that their desire was really into it. And it sounds like you've got the same desire. We just need to figure out how to make it work. We can talk after. That's definitely a deep question. Any other questions? Yeah, great question. She's asking about small quantity generators. And so for us, we call those CESQGs, conditionally exempt small quantity generator. That's anyone that's a business that is going to generate roughly less than 200 pounds a month of hazardous waste, hazardous materials. If they go over that, they're a large quantity generator, and typically DEQ or the state will inspect them. We try to go along on some of those larger quantity generator inspections. It's a great learning opportunity for us to see what's going on at the state level on the other end. The education that the state puts into it, it has been fabulous to partnership with that. We do charge the CESQGs for disposal. Our rate is still cheaper than if they went by themselves to a contractor to dispose of it for them. So we have very competitive rates. Unfortunately, we spend a lot of time arguing with these guys. They don't want to pay even our small fee, so it really pits us in an argument sometimes, and it is easier sometimes to just let them dispose of it rather than cause this big crisis where they want to call the mayor and pull strings and their connections. And but it does make it an unlevel playing field if businesses are bringing us their waste and it's for free. It's basically a taxpayer-supported program, so that's who we want to support. Did that answer your question? Okay. So she's asking about Samsung. If we have a contract in place, how that partnership came about. Without going into the history of the legislature, a couple years back, trying to get some support for manufacturers to take over and handle the waste that they're making. The partnership is what was suggested, and if the true nature of the partnership were pushed, there would be more than 20 e-scrap collections just on the Salt Lake County corridor. So that tells you how inadequate this is actually working. That's the negative. There should be many more, and it should be statewide, not just in Salt Lake County. So there are some flaws with the partnership. We're working through those. Your question about the contract makes me laugh because that is a circular conversation. Samsung keeps sending us the same draft. Our DA's office keeps looking at the same draft saying this won't work. It's not going anywhere. We have totally dropped getting a contract. The contract doesn't mean anything anyway because Samsung always puts a clause in there that they can walk away without penalty at any time. So it's a partnership where we try to keep them happy. We ask for them to do as much as we feel like they'll do without walking away from the table. So we push the envelope pretty good sometimes. We make them uncomfortable, but at the same time, we try to nurture that relationship. You know, plaques, awards, press conferences, we do sing Samsung's praise, and I'm not knocking them. They've been really good to work with. But it has been an ongoing struggle, and it's a constant nurturing of that relationship. So even if you're trying to start any kind of program, HHW collection program, nurturing your relationships within your community is the best advice I can give you. I almost daily have to communicate with Samsung to keep that relationship constant, up to speed. The direction we're going has to be in tune with what Samsung sees they want to go with. Samsung is, I know they're not happy. They're taking all manufacturers' waste of any electronic device, and there's no other company working to do that in Utah at this time. So it is a little bit of an unlevel playing field. But again, Samsung's been great to work with, and we're very appreciative that they are because it's helped us with our budget immensely. Any other questions? Yes? Well, that's a really good question. So for those of you that didn't hear, he's asking when you're working with city and county governments, county councils, things like that, what are some education topics to bring up to these guys so you can convince them to get their buy-in to this program so that you can get money to fund it? Boy, that's really a tough question too. Partnerships, you've got to get out there and meet with these folks daily. Just showing up once to a meeting and saying this is why we need funding for this program isn't going to go far. But if you're trying to educate them on the hazards of hazardous waste, I think visual, have them out to a site where you can do with controlled hazmat guys. I think that really hits home with what kind of flammability, toxics, reactive chemicals we're dealing with. Yeah, I think that is a common misconception that landfills can handle it all. There's a lot of information out there on liners for landfills. I was just reading something the other day, and I don't have the source to cite for you right now. I don't remember what article it was, but it was talking about liners in landfills. 8% of all landfill liners leak. Varying degrees of leakage, but you get a little bit of leakage, that's gonna up your chance of some really bad leachate. You don't want that getting in the soil. You don't want that getting in the drinking water, the aquifer. One of the selling points I read from an HHW collection on the East Coast, there's some trends nationwide where some drinking water is reconditioned sewage, and sewage treatment plants cannot handle pharmaceuticals. They're not there to take out the pharmaceuticals. That's not what they're testing for. They're not testing for these solvents, these amines, these chlorinated crazy things. So you boil that down to, is that gonna come out in our drinking water? Luckily, we're great here in Utah that everything's coming pristine and up high in the mountains from the snow melt. But still, I think that's a great take-home message as well. Thank you. Go ahead.
If I might add to that.
Yeah, please.
I'm an elected official, and generally, elected officials are connected to different departments within the municipality.
Yeah, you've got to sometimes educate your elected officials like you do the public. It's not much different. I wouldn't treat them any different, you know. Answer their questions. Anything else? Yes. I'm not as familiar with your program. However, I was reviewing your educational brochure this morning, and I thought that was fabulous. So one thing we didn't talk about, time constraints, trying to stay on topic, is alternative cleaners, composting, and that's something I think is great in your education material. You also have what's the concern? Why is this particular waste stream a problem? And then it'll say off to the side what's a recommended alternative. So for almost every household cleaner, a variation of water, lemon juice, baking soda, and elbow grease is a great substitute for these nasty chemicals. And that's something that I think is great on your educational material. I don't know much about your collection events or the amount of waste you're collecting, so I don't know that I could speak to that. I believe they are. I don't know to the full extent, though. Someone from Davis County maybe can help me out. I don't believe Davis County owns the landfill. Is that correct? I think that's a privately owned landfill. They do collect hazardous waste there, but that's all a privately funded issue. We have met with them. We don't get a lot of insight into their business because it is private. I think that brings up a great point that having all health departments get together and see who's doing something well, who could maybe work on a certain topic, and then roundtable how we can all get to the same page. Funding is going to be vastly different from county to county, health department to health department, so that's another issue. Uniformity. As I've been to other HHW facilities in the nation, I find that we're a little bit different because our HHW is within a subsection of the health department. Usually this falls within public works or sanitation in most states, so this is a little bit different. And funding is all across the board in all the states. It's different. I'm being cut off.